been here to help you meet people and understand who is in our community, the expertise in our community, and some words of wisdom. And today we have with us Anton James. And I asked Anton before the call, how would he describe who he is? I'm going to ask him to do that because he said, wow, that's a hard question. And I think since it's hard for him, I thought he should think about it and tell us. How would you describe the work and what you do, Anton?
Again, that was, it's a bit of a challenge because there's no one universal application. But if I was to say, generally speaking, I'm really a conduit to help businesses transform their effectiveness. Really someone that can help facilitate, understand, and really develop change. I'm a strategist at heart. That was my basis. That's where I come from in terms of from a career perspective. And oftentimes I utilize that to help empower teams, companies, professionals to really realize their goals. Many people know goals, but they don't know how to get there. So I would say I'm a GPS for business class.
I like that. I like that. And now you are working with Sandler Training, the world's largest global training company in leadership. They teach leadership, team management, and sales performance. What's your role there now?
So really, I head up the teams. I head up the teams that actually engage sales, communication. I direct and as we roll out to various companies and various sizes. So that's typically what I do. Again, it's maintaining my same consultancy type of interaction as I've been in the past.
Okay, and you mentioned also that you also maintain a private practice.
That's
Who
true.
are your clients in private practice? What person comes and says, Anton James, I need help?
You know, it's actually ironic. There is no one universal. I have worked in Canada, US, and Europe in various industries from pharmaceutical to medical to IT. Typically, I do a lot in IT and startups. But who they are, they're individuals that are really trying to look to take an idea, take a performance, and really realize optimal performance. So someone that really knows what they want, but they don't know how to get there. That's what typically call me. And that will usually be, and again, it's been in various realms throughout my career.
Okay. What would you say was a pivotal moment or a little story that got you involved in this? Because one doesn't wake up and say, I think I'm going to be this strategist in sales and leadership. How did you get to that part of your life?
Wow, another interesting question. My trajectory from a career perspective, it didn't necessarily go that way. I originally went to school in the States, and then I came back and I went to University of Toronto. And as I graduated, I got recruited out straight by UPS into their strategy team. I was one of the 4 guys part of their strategy. And what that involved, and that's really the pivotal point. So what that really involved, I would sit with the CEOs and the C-levels of Canada, US, and Europe and understand what they wanted to achieve from whether strategically or operation, whatever the case may be. And I would develop strategies to facilitate those goals. And I work with cross-functional teams to implement them. And so because that was in the marketing realm, that really opened up my aspect to marketing as a whole. But what really got me involved in marketing or have an interest in marketing, it was really, as I said, I was originally originally planning to go into law. But in the last year, I went and met with quite a few lawyers, and I saw, nothing personal to Donna and all the rest of the lawyers out there. I didn't want what they had. You know, I love their money, I love their power, but did I want to work for 15 years, 18 hours a day, Did I want to be sit down there and subjected to paperwork upon paperwork with other people? I didn't want that lifestyle. And so I was looking for something that would enable me to, one, help guide and direct, because that's always been part of who I am as an individual, and help, but also one that also gave you the power to do certain aspects, but also the influence to help. Helping is by nature part of what's innate in me. And it just manifests different ways. Law was enabled me to help those that are disenfranchised for whatever reason, or discommunicated. Marketing and strategy really allows me to help a company reach their goals.
Okay. So Donna, he wasn't, he just didn't love the law, which is good. I understand.
18 hours a day, their kids hate them, they're divorced 3 times.
If I may, just before Anton starts, my daughters have one goal in life, and that's the ABL stream. Anything but lawyer.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. Tell them that, because I understand.
You understand. They see mom working really hard. So we chatted a little bit before the call. What does the environment mean today in light of everything that's happening? What is the environment particularly? And we chatted about our community. You said our community. Let me first ask you, how do you define our community?
That's a hard question, because our community is not united. We're only united as in color, or having pigment, shall I say, because it varies in culture, it varies in practices, and varies in belief, it varies in many. But when I describe it, or what my vision is, similar to similar to.
Can you mute that person?
I think it's Anika. Anika, you
might sorry.
I think it's Anika. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
So, I'm so sorry. Your question was?
Yes. How do you define what is our community? Because a lot of people say that our community should do this. So, and it is not monolithic. So, how would you define?
While that's true, I think we have to find a way to come under one umbrella. When you look at other communities, i.e. the Jewish community, they vary on their beliefs, they vary on their social economics, they vary on various different things. However, they all unite, whether they believe in the Jewish as a religion or as a faith or a practice, they all unite that, listen, as a whole, we all are connected because of the Holocaust. We all reject that. So when I describe our community, it's really, when I'm talking about our community, I'm talking about the Black diaspora as one, because while we vary in many things, we do have certain things that are in common. We have universal, there are challenges within our community of how we interact, how we're perceived, how we're treated from the law, how we are as a success rate. We're grouped in certain buckets. And so when I'm defining our community, I'm talking about the Black diaspora as a whole.
Okay, so what advice would you now give, or what concrete steps could you suggest to our community as a whole? And you mentioned that there's some traditional beliefs that are holding many people back, and we're never going to say all, but many people back. Describe what you see that as, and help us figure out how we move from that.
Wow, okay. That's a very big question. What are some of the things that are holding our people back? I think, first of all, people got to understand a couple of things. That a lot of families that have come, we're talking Canada right now, have come there are from immigrant-based families and from wherever they come from. So they're coming into Canada with an aspiration of what they want to achieve. However, not growing up with generational knowledge on finances or business or practices, oftentimes they translate or they bring traditional views and practices in here and expect success. And it's a little difficult. It's a little difficult as a community. So for example, when setting up a business, we are more relationship based. So we don't necessarily have contracts. We don't necessarily put practices in there. We don't necessarily train our people. We don't necessarily have systems in there. We don't necessarily have a lot of things in there to allow a business to navigate the blind spots of success. And that's really hurt us. Otherwise, they also have a lot of myths, such as, you know, in sales, you know, a lot of people, so one thing I do is I focus on sales, right? And here's the reality. You have companies, people setting up companies, but 75% of the population is either afraid of rejection or public speaking. Yet these same people are responsible for selling and ensuring to grow their business. Well, if you can't get over the behavior, if you don't have the attitude, the psychology of it, of how to get beyond that, how do you engage? When you do engage an audience, what do you say? If you believe that, you know what, we're different or we're less than, how do you come from an equal business stature? But there's so many aspects there. So when you're asking that question, it's very hard. I know there's a lot of myths I can talk about specific if you want to.
Yes, please. Let's go into, particularly as it relates to your area of expertise, training and leadership in sales, etc.
Okay, well, then no problem. You know, in sales and leadership, one thing, people believe that all sales is equal, and it's not. It varies vastly. You know, the individual, one person said, well, you know, I'm good in sales, I can sell. I was back home and I sold, I don't know what you sold. It's not the same. The variance of, are you a hunter? Are you a farmer? Those are each variance has different skill sets. You know, is it a product sale? Is it a consultative sale? What size are you, who are you selling to? Is it a medium? How do you target who you're selling? Could I go with t-shirts and jeans and sell to a corporate entity? How do I sell to one that has a larger organization? You know what? Is there systems in there? When I'm targeting, am I targeting for quantity, for quality? Those are part of the problems with, you know, sales as a whole. You know, people say, well, I've been selling and we're growing. We've been growing at 10%. And I'm like, I love to hear that you're growing, but that is so relative. You know, you're growing at 10% and you have success. Phenomenal. But what would success really look like? It's not growth rate, but it's effectiveness rate. Of everyone that you've dealt with, if you're only closing 10% and you're having success, what type of success would you have if you were to be able to wrap it up to 25, 30%? You know, how do you ensure what you're looking at is even? How do you know what you're doing is effective? And that's part of the questions. You know, my guys have X amount of experience and they're great is another one. Okay, that's phenomenal. They have X amount of experience. But everything has evolved. Look how much has evolved in 4 months, much less 4 years, much less 40 years. You know, will a car of 1970 compete with a car of today? No, there have to be an openness to exploring what you're doing in order to be effective.
So, Anton, I want to stop you there because Tracy asked, how do you develop an easy elevator pitch?
How do you? Yeah, that's a very
hard question.
So really, when you're going to an elevator pitch, you're really talking about prospecting. And so let me break that down because it's not just an elevator pitch by itself. Prospecting is the process of engaging and finding new clients. And typically speaking, prospecting is one of the things that people hate the most. People hate prospecting. When you're asking, how do you create an elevator pitch? The first thing I would say to do is you really have to explore. And here's why. Within selling, there is a system. There's actually 2 systems within selling. And one you're either going to go into by default, or the second you are going to choose to do that. And what's the default system? I'm getting to your question. I'm trying to answer your question, but I got to give some context to it. The system by default is this. This is what most people, it's called the buyer system. And that's what is universally accepted. When you get home after a hard day's work and you pick up that phone and you answer the phone, and the guy starts going into the ramble of how he's going to clean your ducts and give you the best deal. What do you automatically do? Like this little bang, how quickly do you hang up the phone or want to hang up the phone? Because there's a certain mindset that when people receive certain calls is how they treat them. So my answer to your question is, first, you have to understand what people are currently doing. What type of call people are currently making, or a 30-second pitch. We call it a 30-second commercial. What people are doing, find out what they're doing, and don't do that. That's the first thing. Do not do that. The key is not to sit down there and tell somebody how great you are and what you can do and blah, blah, blah. They don't care. People don't care how great you are. They say what you can do for them. So there is a process to how do you create a 30-second commercial is what you're asking or prospecting. But it's really based upon how you can facilitate the services of a targeted audience. I can go into the specifics, but that will take a long time. If you really want me to, I can.
Okay, well, Tracy can let me know if she wants any more detail on the chat. But you mentioned people are, sales are either hunters or farmers. And what did you mean by that?
Yeah, so in sales itself, there are many kinds of sellers, guys that are sales. And so some guys, they're successful in one aspect, but they're unsuccessful in others. A hunter is defined by somebody that really wants to go and find new business. They want to be pick up the phone and calling people, or they want to be networking at conferences or handshaking with individuals and just hunting down new business. Whereas a farmer is somebody that really wants to, once that business is acquired, and then they can take it and build relationships. They can navigate, they can go deeper within the existing pockets. The reality is, in larger organizations, some are exclusively hunters and some are exclusively farmers. But in smaller organizations, in professional services, accountants, lawyers, chiropractors, architects, they tend to have to do both. And so when people apply, farmer type mentality to hunting services, they find themselves, they're not effective. And vice versa.
Okay. Another question asks, how is your personal brand part of your pitch?
Oh, for sure. Is that me personally, or is that for a company? Is the question. Is my personal brand, or is
the question was, yeah, how is your personal brand part of your pitch? So I would imagine whether you are pitching on behalf of a company or, yourself and your business.
All right. So in marketing and reaching an audience, there's a certain formula for success, even when you're creating an ad. So let me back up. My background is, I started off in marketing. I did marketing, headed up marketing for many years in UPS, I did consulting in TTC, Rogers, TELUS, Autism Ontario, and so forth. So my core background is marketing. Within marketing itself, I like NLP. NLP is called neuro-linguistic programming. And what that really is understanding how the brain works so you can effectively communicate with people and reach people. The key is, so you want to get what marketing does, you're taking a process and you are building a transitional plan that allows what you're going from doing a push, where you're always pushing services or product or campaign, to eventually your transition so you can pull people in, people will be reaching out to you. So when you ask, how does your brand actually impact your ability to affect? Part of the formula to be effective is you have to have credibility. You have to have credibility. You have to have, people have to understand and know you can relate and can facilitate those needs. So how important is your brand? It's very important. It's important for people to know who you are, what size what you can do, how you can service their needs. Because really what they want to know is if I give you my business for whatever thing, it's going to impact me. Are you able to do so? That's what a brand actually does. The difficulty with branding, now that's a total different side note, but the difficulty with branding in our community is oftentimes we are trying to compete against large players and competing the way they compete. We cannot do that. Early on in my career, after I left UPS, I was at UPS for 6-7 years. And as I said, I was one of the members of the strategic planning team. After that, I went to a startup company. And at the startup company, I was the head of marketing and sales. And what we were doing at the time I went there, it was just a startup company. And we were to compete against, I was in the telecom space. When I went there, it was very interesting for me because I left UPS, very corporate, blue suit, white tie. It was very corporate, no facial hair.
Right.
And I went to this company is IT, and the guys that came, big burly beards, dirty t-shirt and track pants. So it's not just a knowledge base, it was an interactive base. But the president, what he wanted me to do was basically compete like everyone else was. And I was like, listen, you cannot do that.
Right.
As a brand, if you cannot outspend Coke, or I was in the telecom, you can't spend like Rogers or Telus or Bell. You can't do that. As a brand, you need to find ways to distinguish yourself and compete on ways that show value that they can't do. So, i.e., people don't care that you have a pretty name and a pretty color unless they know you're able to deliver an effective solution to their problem. So when I competed against, i.e., the reason why I was to compete against Rogers and Telus and so forth was because when they were trying to go after everyone, I went after a small niche, and I was phenomenal at a small niche. I did a direct, in contrast to a brand campaign, I did what was called an emotional response campaign. The difference between a brand campaign and an emotional response campaign, a brand campaign is to sit down and tell you how great my brand is. I am Coke, I am AT&T, I am whatever. No, emotional response campaign is designed to let you know that, listen, here's what I can do, here's what I can do for you, and I can do for you right now. So it's promoting a service. I would say a lot of times, that's what we need to do, because if you go after a brand campaign, it's expensive and long. Long story short, I beat players in Canada, I beat players in the US, I beat players in Europe, and eventually that's why they flew me down to Switzerland. I spoke at United Nations, tell the rest of the world how to compete against North America. If you cannot win, you cannot beat a player if you play by their real rules. You won't win. It's designed to go against you. So when people say how important is branding, it's very important, but it has to also be effectively utilized.
Good answer. So before we go to the question from Julie, when you came on the call, I said, love your purple cravat. And it showed us, let's see it a little bit, because it says, that's one of the things, as I saw you, I liked your glasses, I liked your look, I liked your cravat. And how important, some people say you shouldn't have to make that's not who I am. I should be okay if I look sloppy today. And we can look at the guy from, is it Facebook, who only wears a t-shirt and a jeans. And if you were to try and wear only a t-shirt and a jeans, you would not be looked at the same way he does. So how important is that dress part? Still keeping who you are, because I really think too many of us feel we can't have our own individuality. We gotta fit in, and you can't, because you stand out already because of who we are. How do you answer that part? Before I go to Julie. Oh, and somebody said your cravat matches Donna's purple orchid. Anyway,
Love it, Donna. Love it.
Your purple orchid at the back. So anyway, I digress.
No problem.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so I went to school in the States originally, and I remember there was this one guy. The guy was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was a pre-med student when I first went down there, and he was a junior. And I heard them talking about it. But I went up to talk to him, I said, Tony, how you doing? And this was his response. Yo, man, I'll be chilling, B. I'll be cool. And immediately, despite his intelligence, and I'm telling you, the cat was very intelligent, it immediately changed the shift of how he was perceived. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, similarly as in my realm, sales, there's a system that you choose or a system you default in, or as we see in the States, there is a system that is apparent to one body or others. There is always a perception that's going forward. People buy or value or judge emotionally. Now, if you understand, again, my background is really why I had strength was because of my NLP, is really understanding how the brain works. People buy emotionally, not based upon facts. They justify their actions based upon facts. So if someone sees you and sees you to represent something that's highly important, and you appear to look a certain way, and it just so happens to tie into the negative perception that they have of your quote unquote people, then they're also going to have a perception of what you're going to deliver. Because I promise you, if their vision of your people is negative, their vision of what you deliver is going to be negative. So the key is to understand, the first is to understand how you appear, what is status quo. That does not mean, let me be clear, that does not mean that you have to curtail and lose your cultural identity. No. I am, without a question, I am a Black man. However, I also know what the playing field is. I also know how to be trilingual. I can sit down there and people have no idea of my ethnic background. They have no idea where I'm coming from. We can't talk that way but I will never talk that way in work because I know the perception that comes there. So we must be aware of the perception. Second of all, you have to be able to, if you want to be perceived in a particular way, and perception oftentimes is the only reality they ever have. People say, yeah, you shouldn't have to. Yeah, but that's just not reality. You know, someone says, you know what, this person's a great person. You know what, they're fabulous. But when you first meet them, you only find out they're a great person after you have discourse with them. But most times you don't have discourse. You look at them. I look at Donna and say, Donna is good looking. I want to know her. I don't look at, no, yes. I don't want to look at someone else. It's just based upon initial perception. So people only tend to want to do business with people that they admire or emotionally connected, 2, they like, and 3, are comfortable with, and they can therefore necessarily connect with. Once that is there, so if you take out the bonding and rapport component of business, if you diminish that, you will never get to the aspects where you can go deeper. Okay. If you can't, so you have to know the playing field in which you're playing.
Okay. So Julie says, what do you say to people who say, fake it till you make it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. The reality is, but fake it till you make it, I totally agree, but make it real quick. Make it real quick. We do not have the luxury of time of sitting around there and going through the regular matriculation process of learning. Oftentimes you're given one chance, you're given one opportunity, and this is for regardless of color, regardless of culture, in any aspect, you're given one chance. So do your best. Do your best with what you actually have. We may not have all of the access to tools and resources and knowledge, but we know how to get it. We know how to utilize it and utilize. Don't be comfortable with being at a mediocre level. Growing up, as an example, fake it till you make it. And you need to strategically think ahead of time where you're going so you know how to get there. Machiavelli says, aim for the stars. If you fall short, you end in the sky. That's the same way. You may not know how to fly today, but if you know that you're driving towards having a spaceship, you will get there. From the time I was 6 years old, I knew my trajectory already. I knew which school I was going to. I knew which university I was going to. I knew certain financial aspects which I would have. So in that time I was 6, because my parents taught me from those time I was young. We have to have that same mentality with our careers.
6.
Oh, from 5. I knew for sure what university I was going to. From 5, my whole family goes there. We have
wow.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So yeah, small things right here. It's different within our community. I would come back and go to graduations, and people are making big things about it. I'm like, that's great, but it's high school graduation. It's just graduation. This is not a end thing. It's just only part of the process. When we're getting to fake it till we make it, the reality is we got to go for the bigger. We got to go for the better. We got to continue to drive, but don't be comfortable once you get initial success. One of the biggest hurdles of true success is comfortability.
Complacency, just thinking you've arrived before you have really done much. Yeah. So you mentioned, I want to go back, you mentioned that you spoke to the United Nations. Yeah. That's huge. Would you say that was the highlight of your career to date? Tell us a little bit about who you spoke to, how many people, and why did they invite you, Anton James?
Okay. Well, I'll throw this out there first of all. I think the reason why I got there was God's favor. Let's be honest and truthful. As great as I am and as intelligent I think I am, I'm just not that smart. I don't think anyone is. That opportunity is a phenomenal opportunity. Very few people can actually say that. So I'll put that out there as a starting point. But why did they select me, and why did I go, and what did I say? As mentioned, I started off my career as a strategist and an analyst for UPS. And as such, what I did throughout my career, I would study many things, wealth cycles around the world. I would study companies, countries. To find out how to help companies reach their goals, specifically UPS. You know, they want to make $300 million. They want to do new products. They want to roll things out. They want to be able to make partnerships, acquisitions, and mergers. I had to learn to do all those key aspects. And when I so let me go back a little bit. That's going to give some caveat to your question. When I first went to UPS, because I was recruited out as the quote unquote whiz kid, a lot of guys within UPS, within the management team, were drivers that were promoted up. And so they thought I was coming to give them their job. I was coming to take their job. So a lot of guys, man, the first little while, it was hard, man. They wouldn't want to show me anything because they thought I was coming to show them up. I'm like, listen, I'm not coming to show you up. I'm coming to do my own job. So what that resulted in was I was determined. I'm like, you're not beating me. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do it effectively. So what that meant was I was working oftentimes from 8 o'clock till 11, 8 o'clock to 1, 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning, back again. Because I did that, it was hard, but at the end of 2 years, I knew the system more than anyone else. So I ended up writing and rewriting the company, UPS's 1, 3, and 5 year business planning model. I developed most of their strategies that made the huge hundreds of millions of dollars. I did the acronym. I did a lot of stuff because I went through that chaos and crazy period, right, to learn things hard over and over and over again. When I left UPS and went to this startup company, I brought that same mentality. And that mentality was, how do I circumvent challenges? And so I would look and I would study the market. So in Canada, I was competing in the telecom space, Rogers, Telus, and Bell. Those are the big players. There are a lot of small players, but those are the big ones. What are they doing? And what if once you identify what they're doing, don't do that. That's the first rule. People I don't understand it. You know, you have $100,000 and you're given a car allowance. Are you going to buy a Kia or are you going to buy a Benz? Well, most people will buy a Benz. Well, if Benz is growing by 10%, how could you therefore do exactly what they're doing and say you're going to grow by 25%? That's just not logical. It's not practical. So you need to find different ways to effectively grow that they can't do. You know, there's ways when you're that big,
you can't pivot.
You cannot turn so quickly. So how can you do to quickly turn? And so I exploited different ways that they couldn't do and utilize the strengths. Find out what were we wicked at and find ways to optimize that. And I optimized in how we sold. I optimized it in connecting with media. I optimized that in presenting to other audiences. I optimized with partnership. I optimized that against them. And I kept doing that. In Canada, they were saying, well, how are you as a small player beating the players in Canada, US, go down to the States, Verizon, US Sprint, AT&T, go over to Europe, French Telecom, Deutsche Telekom. How are you doing it? So they brought me down to United Nations to speak to Lithuania and Estonia and so forth. I was in the Security Council. You got to put your cup on your interpreter on your ears. And they're saying, well, how are you doing it? There was many seminars. And I would say, well, first of all, stop doing what you're doing. Everyone wanted to They want to build the systems like the Americans had, and they want to market like the Americans had and engage like the Americans had. And I go, you'll never win that game. You can never outspend someone with money by doing exactly what they're doing. But what you can do, you know your people. You know what they do. You know how they do. You know how they work. You know their limitations. Facilitate that. So I would show them specific ways. France, Estonia, this is what you're doing. Look at your infrastructure. Look what happened here. Look at your government. Look at your people. Here is how you start targeting. Here is where you make it success. Here is how you grow. Don't grow like that. You'll never compete. And so that is some of the things I did there. And so I taught other companies, specifically smaller, how to compete against big players.
So that whole thing of who are your people? Who is your tribe? It's a very important concept, and even in leadership, if you don't know who you're talking to, and how are you going to lead if you don't know who is there? Who are your people? It's a very important. I like that. So it sounds. It must have been, if you don't mind taking a minute to tell me what it felt like when you stood to give your speech in Switzerland, because we don't get to meet many people who have actually done such an amazing thing. Just tell me, what did it feel like, sound like? How did you feel emotionally? Were you nervous? Were you, wow, how did I get here? Lots of questions.
Well, yes and no. So let me answer the question. It was more than one conversation, speech, presentation that was actually done out there. But in order to do that, I got to take you back a little bit. Growing up, I grew up in the church. And growing up in the church, my parents always made me speak in front of the church and do this action and do that and do that. And so from the time I was a kid, a lot of the nervousness that I would have in speaking, I was able to deal with, because from when you're young, that's when you're really intimidated the most. So intimidation is not something that usually grabs me, whereas the situation does. The situation was a large one. You're speaking to the heads and princes and king. It was phenomenal, but there was a factor of intimidating. What did it feel like? It was a surreal feeling. It was, I can't describe. I was proud of myself. I was proud, and I was happy, I was elated, I was excited. But then I also had to marry that with, I had to ensure to use this as an opportunity to really help and make a difference, and show that my difference in terms of my skin color makes a difference. Because when one of the events I was out there, they were describing me, they had the bio and they were reading out my bio, and this guy worked for this company and da 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 da, and you hear them clapping, and those times I had no beard, had no gray, I had a baby face. But you think of a baby face now, I was baby, and I walked the room and it went from to.
Where did he come from?
But I'm telling you, that's exactly what it was. But at that point, I've learned, because of my family, because of my background, because of just who I am and just the process, to be self-assured internally first. So if I didn't look then, and I do not look now for external validation, because once you are trapped by that, you're in trouble, because there are enough times they're coming against you and they're surprised when you do well. They're surprised, oh, you're not like who? But like, which people are you comparing me to? You're different. How am I different? How many people do you know? What's your base?
Good point.
It was really, it was a euphoric feeling. I'm telling you, there was nothing like it. It really was a phenomenal, and it really was a proud moment. But I'm gonna tell you this though. This is surprising to most. While that was my most momentous experience I had, it's not my most proud from a career perspective.
Okay, tell us what that is.
This one's a strange one, and most people won't relate to it, but that's fine. It's not for them.
It's yours.
Throughout my career, I've helped many companies do phenomenal things, great success. UPS, make hundreds of millions of dollars, mergers and acquisitions, grow products, grow companies to Canada's fastest growing company from a startup. Phenomenal thing. But what I am most proud of was my work with Autism Ontario. And I'm going to tell you why. I have 2 kids and they're healthy. Healthy, pain in my tail sometimes, but healthy and blessed, no problems. I went down one time and I saw this one guy and I was helping out with a project and he had 2 kids and they were both on the spectrum. They had non-communication, non-verbal, and one child never slept more than 15 minutes at a time.
Wow.
The other child just rocked back and forth all day. And I was like, mercy God, if that was me. So the reason why my work with Autism Ontario, I ended up doing a lot of work with them. I ended up chairing their largest regional fundraiser. And why that's most proud is because unlike boxes at UPS or IT services and e-commerce services, and also those impacted revenue and they made a company well. My work with Autism Ontario actually impacted and transformed lives. I think you got to get to a place in your career where you're chasing more than just the dollars. Don't misunderstand. Money is very, very important because it allows for experiences and resources cost money. But money alone cannot be the end all and be all. Is how am I going to impact and make things better for the community around me? Or specifically, why do I work with a lot of stuff now and I want to work within our own community? How am I going to change things for when my kids get older? When I was going to school, came back, not only in the States in Michigan, but also back here at U of T. I had a BMW, pearl white, pretty system. It was nice. Oh, it's pretty to believe. But I was harassed continually. See what's happening in the States right now? I can totally relate to it. I'm not an intimidating guy in any stretch or the means. I can talk very eloquently, very articulately. I can be very distinct. I can be law-abiding. Yes, I have this other side to me. Don't get it twisted. But I was harassed continually. Pulled over. What am I doing with this car? How do I have drugs in the car? How did I forward this car? What am I doing in this neighborhood? I match the description. And I sit down and I say this. And why did it impact me? I'm like, listen, if I don't do anything different, how is my kids going to experience the same thing that I'm experiencing now? I look in the States right now and what was harassment to me and is a pain in my tail because they'd be pulling me over, 3, 4, 5 times a month. It was uncomfortable and it was inconvenient, but I would never fear death. But how am I impacting or making a change so that it's not like that going down? And so that's why Autism Ontario was important to me. That's why making a difference in my community, and that community may be just Black, the Black diaspora. Why is it different? Because I want to pass along some of the skill sets, some of the knowledge, some of the experiences to make it easier for our people, even if it's not for me, for those coming behind. When I was going to UPS, let me back up a little bit. When I was going we were flying to Switzerland, I sat with the owner of my company. There was 3 brothers and they lost $20 million each in 1 month. And I remember sitting down there. It was funny because at that time I felt like, anyways, Uncle Tom video was like, oh, massa, what's we gonna do? Was we gonna have a jobs tomorrow? Because I was like $20 million. I was like, that's just crazy. But when I actually talked to him, I said, listen, so what are we really going to do strategically? Are we going to make it? His only response was no convertible this year. And I said, what? And anyway, we picked up that conversation. We were on the flight over to Switzerland, and the conversation went something like this. He said, Anton, Anton, you've done a lot of stuff for us. And I said, well, thank you. He says, but let me tell you, the system doesn't work for you the way it works for me. And at first I was offended. I was like, well, what are you trying to say? He goes, no offense mean. He goes, you have to know how the system works and how to work within the system and make the system work for you. And he gave me an example. He said, for example, Anton, if you make $1 million and I make $1 million, you're probably going to take home around $400,000, where I'll take home probably about $920,000. And he goes, there's ways from a tax perspective that you structure companies in order to optimize that. There's ways you roll things out. And they started giving me insights to the optimal way to work, the optimal way to be effective, the optimal way to roll things out. And I didn't know. And the reality is, we as a people don't know, or anyone that doesn't come through generational knowledge passed on. I was in response for all the MBA students that came in at UPS and throughout my career. I was responsible for many aspects, but none of them has ever been taught. They've been taught how to be employees. They haven't been taught how to be employers. They haven't taught them how to bypass the blind spots to make sure that their business, if a bus hits them, that their business has continuity. They don't know how to structure things, what systems to use, what process. They don't know. And I'm like, they don't know, not because it's not a strike against them. It's just, if you weren't exposed, how are you supposed to know? So for me personally, again, why I like autism is because it was an opportunity for me to help people compete fairly on an even scale. Listen, there is a difference. You are only this effective because you aren't doing A, B, and C. Let me show you how. That's what I like. That's what I think the biggest difference.
Wow, that's awesome. Going back, however, somebody on the chat said, in this age of technology and digital selling, is there still any place at all for cold calling to selling products and services?
Listen to me, man. Listen, I hear that so much. Cold calling is dead. Prospecting is dead. Let me tell you something. That is alive from the pit of hell. Cold calling is alive, and it's very effective. And as a matter of fact, the most people that say it to me, they end up being my clients. But what is dead is old techniques. As with everything else, there's ways to be effective at it. There's absolutely. But if you go in there, hi, how you doing? Meaning when people hear that, they respond a certain way. Me, I come from it's how you talk, is what you say, it's when you say, it's the word. There is a whole psychology to effective cold call. I don't remember the first question asked me, how do you make a 30-second commercial? It incorporates that as well. It really is understanding, following a set formula to actually engage. Something like,
give us a quick 30-second example. Nothing is better than hearing from a master.
If I want to hear from a master, I'll look to find one, because it's not me. It's a work in progress. Everything is an evolution, right? But it really is. When you call somebody, the first thing is assuming you've already done the techniques to get by the gatekeepers. One, you got to set your mindset straight. That's the first thing. If you want to do prospecting, is you have to go and believe that you're providing value. You got to believe it. It can't be, head knowledge. It's got to be internalized. Two, you got to believe that the person you're speaking to is equal stature. So if you're intimidated by the person, then you're going to be, okay, no. Three, it's got to be conversational. Second of all, and then four, give them the ability to be comfortable with not doing it. Listen, how you doing? My name's Anton James. Not sure if you've heard of me. Yes, no? Okay, no problem. I want to let you know straight up as an example. I could say something like, when I meet guys such as yourself, business owners and professionals, oftentimes they tend to tell me a lot of things. But a couple of things are pretty consistent. They tend to have problems with things such as prospecting. They love their teams, but you know what? They don't know what to say. They don't know, is it their technique? Do they know if it's how they're saying? Is it their tone? And so forth. I can go through a whole spectrum, but it's really a conversational one that marries technique, tone, words, and even what you say. Tell them, listen, you know what? Don't be afraid. You got to understand what people are thinking. So don't be afraid. I said, listen, I'm cold calling. This is a sales call. But if you give me 2 minutes, I'll tell you based on what I'm about. If you want to hang up now, go ahead. Or should I? Or will you give me 2 minutes? Typically speaking, someone will give you 2 minutes. You say, all right, listen, you know what? I did a little research and maybe I can help you, but I was thinking I'd done this, that. It's more conversational. In contrast to, hey, how are you doing? This is Anton James. Wouldn't you like to have your ducks clean? That's absolutely not. So there is no there's nothing I can tell you within 10 seconds of how to produce a cold call, but is it effective? It most definitely is. As a matter of fact, most people that tell me that tend to be my clients, and I got them how cold calling.
Right. Years ago, I used to be in sales, and when I first started, I didn't know what to do, and I cannot remember the name of the gentleman, and he said, sales is the most interesting job you'll have because you get to decide how much you want to make. And I thought, okay. And he said, if you say you're going to sell $1,000 worth, that's what you must do. You choose a number, he said. And I remember we came back and he gave us choose a number. And I remember I made my target at 5 o'clock on the Friday, all week. He said, you just don't give up till you hit the number. And then he said, why did you choose such a low number? You're going to spend all that time? Choose a higher number. And each week it works. And you just have to keep every no gets to a yes, that philosophy.
Well, let me say one thing though. You're dead right, but here's what the key thing is. What people don't realize, as within project management and accounting and other so, there is a system that delivers effective results. And I'm going to tell you this, most people do not use a system.
Right.
And what that translated, what that looks like, and when you don't use an effective system, you'll have on a sales team, for example, you have superstars and you have guys that are struggling. You'll have people that do well today, don't do well tomorrow. They have people that there's no conformity. There's no scalable success. What a system actually does, as with teams or other sports, it really enables someone to grow and reach whatever goals they have, because it's now able to tie. So you can now, as an owner, if you have a system, you can manage the salespeople. Because who do you think are the best salespeople? Our salespeople. And who are they going to sell? You. If you don't understand sales, most sales guys, they run over their managers because their managers have no clue. Oh, they're doing activities. A lot of people will do quantity activities, but it's not producing anything. Oh, they're sending enough stuff out, but nothing's closing. Well,
right.
If you don't go through the process or know what a process is to build rapport, to do an upfront contract, to undiscover what the pain is, to see who's the budget, who's the decision maker, what's the process. It can go on forever. So there's ways to make things effective so that you can have the success you want, and you can choose your number. Following a set technique or process.
Yes, he did teach us all that, but it was like eye-opening, because before, you would call and you go, oh my gosh, and it was really eye-opening. Your words are true. We just have, 5 more minutes, but I wanted to ask you, in listening to you, what would you say is your superpower?
Wow. My superpower, I think it's strange. I think my superpower is empathy. Because what empathy really does, when I marry that with my brain is naturally strategic. My brain is naturally strategic and analytical. And because I empathize, I really try to look for every way to help someone. So I try to say, if it was me, what would I do? I'll give you a quick example. I can't read a stitch of notes, but I can play. I can play the piano only by ear. When I came back, no, I won't go to that. We don't have enough time to go to that example. But it's really emphasized.
We have 6 minutes.
Okay, real quick. When I came back from United States, I decided to go to U of T. I originally wanted to go to York University. And the reason why was because the York University had the women. And that's where I wanted to go. I'm just being very truthful. And I remember sitting down to my grandmother, and my grandmother said, Anton, what's the primary reason why you're going to school? And I said, education. And she said, what's the secondary? And I said, social. She said, Anton, don't make your secondary your primary. And so I've always learned to adapt that mentality to why I'm effective, because I always try to say, when I'm working with somebody, what is their primary need, not the secondary. Sometimes people get caught with the secondary. They want to look good. They want it to be pretty. They want da 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 da. And I'm trying to say, okay, how do you get on track? How do you help? How do you make a difference? How is your different make a difference? Those are typically what I would say I help out with the most. So my superpower.
Fantastic. Anybody on the call have any other questions they'd like to ask Anton before we wrap up? Because it's been fascinating talking to you. I feel empowered having spoken to you. Anybody on the call? Ross, anybody?
If not, I have one more thing I would say. I would say to our people as a whole, diaspora, generally speaking, be open to expanding. There's enough times I get frustrated because I've traveled Canada, US, and Europe, and a lot of times we don't stay together. What we see what's happening in the States right now, part of the problem is because we are not viewed as an economic power source. We're not seen as a political power source. And because of that, because we're not seen as an economic or political power source, that therefore we can be subjected to. I believe as a people, if we unite and we are able to optimize and fairly compete, given the tools that the other people are using or other communities are using, that we are just as effective, just as great. As a matter of fact, I'm being very humble. I think we're far better. I think we're far better because we've had to strive and push against resistance. So oftentimes, don't be comfortable under, well, I can only achieve this because. No, you can achieve anything you really put your mind to, but you got to be prepared to work. The reality was, yeah, you know what? I've been to United Nations. I've done things other people can't do. I can't say it was me alone. No. But the reality was there was someone that went ahead of me that opened up a door. When you get in there, W.E.D. Bois says, talented 10th, push back and help someone behind you. Help people up. Not only give them the access to, but mentor them. Show them when they're doing something stupid, when they're talking, when they're dressing, when they're acting. Show them. Don't just be protecting your own self. It's one of my frustrations I've seen throughout the career. We can work together. The key is associate yourself, but be selective. Don't find somewhere you have to, you know what? You don't always have to save, but be selective. Those are working or striving to be at the same level and continue to strive.
Wow. In other words, be Talawa.
Talawa.
Word. Talawa. Because
Talawa.
we are Talawa people.
Yes.
Anton, thank you so very much. This has been a very interesting discussion, and I know that people will have got a lot from what you have said. Congratulations on your career to date, and we look forward to hearing more from you. And I'm sure the BBPA has listened and heard. I am sure Donna and others are going to be calling on you because you're somebody they need to keep in the wheelhouse. Thank you so very much. It's been my pleasure meeting you today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Next week, Ask a Professional has moved to every Wednesday at 12 noon. Next week, we're speaking with Tanya Walker about negotiating contracts in this new normal. See you then. Take care.